We're just gonna try to do like a quick, 6-10 minutes of interview stuff.
Fine. Why don't we just start with the history of Circle Blast?
So what are we doing?
Trying to gather whatever Circle of Dust stuff I still have left, and I have a stack of stuff in here, if I remember correctly. Yep, there it is.
What are those?
Not sure. It's been a while since I looked through it. I know I had a bigger stack, but that's all I have left. But I do have some other stuff in the garage. Well, I think I have a bin of merch, shirts and stuff, somewhere in here. Speaking of a little nostalgia, that's the cover to my my rig that I had that I lent to Clank for a tour, and he promptly stuck a whole bunch of stickers on there. I still have it.
What year is that?
This would have been 92 or 93. I'm horrible with memory, but it's somewhere around there.
What kind of shirts are those?
Poorly printed ones. I mean, this box probably represents several years of disappointment.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it for here. I have more stuff, one last batch in the studio. I have a mop. Oh yeah, here we go. Again, I don't totally know, but there should be backing tapes from the first tour. And I know I have some bootlegs of the actual live show. The last time I was kind of forced to go through this stuff was probably about 15 years ago when I moved from New York to Michigan, and I had to move, so I had to actually go through all my stuff. And I had way more of this stuff. But I think in my mind at the time, I was so over Circle of Dust, and I was looking at piles of press and interviews and everything else that I had. I did the only thing that made sense to me at the time, and I took it into the backyard and I burned it in a trash can.
You were over Circle of Dust?
I was over Circle of Dust.
Style-wise, I guess the music has been branded industrial. It fits into what people are categorizing as industrial, although it really isn't industrial.
These musical genres just colliding, but meshing and working together.
Super tight East Coast production, really aggressive, gritty, raw sensibility, combining and blurring the line between synth and rock. Look deep into your eyes, behold the burning flame.
Heavy guitars that whole distorted vocal thing, but not constantly distorted.
It was so heavy, and it had such so rich and full and deep. So much struggle and strife and pain, and it was relatable, and it was artistic and creative.
But it is a hybrid of dance, keyboard oriented type stuff. I guess because you can say my roots were metal. I grew up a metalhead and progressed into the electronic spectrum.
I just remember being so blown away by what was coming out of the speakers because it felt scary.
Once I got a hold of Circle of Dust, it was just like, holy crap, we can do that?
Circle of Dust's story is pretty much one of everything that possibly can go wrong, does go wrong, and then the house underneath it springs a leak and everything floods down the side.
That signal means to stop whatever you are doing and get to the nearest safe place fast. Always remember, the flash of an atomic bomb can come at any time.
So I've been passionate about music from my earliest childhood memory. I remember reacting to music in a way that I didn't really react to many other things. And part of my exposure to that was directly related to my grandfather. I'd go into his music room, and it was just, 15 by 20 room or so, and surrounded, the walls were just stacked from floor to ceiling with records, 8 tracks, reel-to-reels, just all kinds of music. My grandfather, the passion in his life was music. He would sit me down in his room on a chair and pop some headphones on and put on a Tomita record or switched on Bach or even something classical or just music that he loved, and it exposed me to that sound at an early age.
I first met Klayton in 1985.
Hey there. Hey, pick it up. Hello. Pick it up. Okay, you're not picking it up. Well, oh, you are? I hate you so much. Do you really?
One of the main things that hit us off was our love for music. We spent a lot of time listening to music and talking about music, and that was kind of the beginning of it.
We go to used record stores, and we would skim through CDs and pop them in and listen to them and really spend hours in a place like Tower Records.
At that time, especially in the late 80s, music was really changing over, and we were kind of always into finding what was new and was hot and just constantly digging.
The natural thing was to be like, okay, how do I do that? I love the sound of this. How can I make music? Maybe 13 years old, 12 or 13 years old, my mom is like, do you want a drum set? Yes, please. I was excited about this more than I had been about almost anything else up to that point. Like, wow, I'm going to be able to play the drums. I learned by listening to albums, and at that point it was probably a lot of Metallica and Anthrax and thrash metal. So of course I had to go for the fastest stuff. Instead of learning how to play gracefully, I played like an animal. And I hit the skins really hard. So here I am, joined a band, really just friends of mine, of course, and we were just jamming, playing metal. And I was the drummer, and it was pretty evident pretty early on, the drummer didn't really have any say in any of the music. I was pretty much like, if I had input in the music, which I definitely had ideas, I was kind of like, pat it on the head and be like, yeah, just stay behind the drums, you're good, we'll take care of this. So I'd be watching the guitar player, who was really good, and try to watch what he was doing. So I was fascinated by could I do that? So at some point I got him to teach me how to play a basic power chord, just 2 notes. And every time he would get up, I would take his flying V, I'd sit down on his amp, and I would just practice these chords. I would just try to play a chord. And all I wanted to do was be good enough to take multiple instruments and write the things that I was hearing in my head. At some point, this kid I knew introduced me to his Roland D20 keyboard. He had one, and he started explaining to me how he could program drums and keyboards and things, and you could hit this button and it will play back what you played in. And I was like, what? Show it to me. So he started showing me how to sequence, and pretty quickly I had nudged him out of the way. I understood how to make a drum pattern. I just had never done it on anything but drums. So now here I could hit keys. Oh, here's my kick drum, here's my snare drum, there's my tempo. I just play that in, and now it records what I just played and plays it back. Wow, this is amazing. That exploded my mind into the possibilities of creating my own music and kind of getting out of the band dynamic.
I mean, I actually remember the day. That out of nowhere, there's this keyboard in the basement next to the drum kit and the amps and the guitars. And it was just kind of like, what's going on? I'm gonna start doing this now. Gucci, 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 Gucci.
So I had the ability now to run that keyboard and a guitar and a vocal all in different times onto a 4-track cassette and record demos.
Okay, so I guess electronic is where it's at now.
I literally would write thrash beats on this crappy D20 with these huge snares and these huge kicks that are so big they should never be playing that fast, but at that point I didn't care. And I'd write thrash riffs over them. A friend of mine, this guy Kurt Bachman, who was the singer and guitar player in this band Believer, they were signed to this East Coast label called Rex Records. The label decided they wanted to branch out at some point, and they're like, Kurt, we're gonna make you the head of A&R for the East Coast, so your job is to go find East Coast bands that we're gonna sign to the label. He hit me up and goes, what are you working on? I'm doing this new thing, and it's kind of like industrial. And he almost jumped through the phone. He's like, you're making industrial music? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, kinda. You know, as best as I can with the gear I have. And he's like, you need to get me a demo. So I did. I ended up getting him a song and a half.
One day he comes to me and he's like, I want you to hear something. And he has a cassette, and I think we were driving someplace or something like that. And he's like, you need to hear this. He pops it in, and it's the demo for Demoralized.
I can remember this demo. I heard the thrashy stuff, and then I know he was going in a different direction. And I think for me as a musician, and as a creator, I wanted to sign bands that were unique, and his stuff was absolutely unique, and you could tell there was a lot of excellent musicianship there.
What was great about it, and this is actually one of the things that makes Circle of Dust stand out, all industrial, especially the late 80s, early 90s industrial music, all kind of had that metal background to it. But certain bands had more of a punk style to it. Some others had like a different, but with Clay, with Circle of Dust, it was more of a melodic metal to it. There was harmonies with it.
It was my natural propensity to write a chorus and actually sing a melody over the top of it, have some kind of hook. And I didn't even recognize it as that back then. I just knew that I had to do this because this is what was going to sound right to my ears. I didn't realize I was writing a chorus, or I didn't realize I was writing a hook. I just did what sounded right to me.
You hadn't heard anything like it at that time, so I was blown away.
So it was kind of a no-brainer for me. I mean, it was just like, okay, signed. Like, we have to sign him, right?
I very distinctly, very vividly remember being at the place I worked. And I get this call, and they're like, hey, this guy Kurt's on the phone for you. I'm like, yo, what's up, man? He's like, hey, got the demo. We listened to it. I played it for the label. And the next words were, we want to sign you. And I was just like, could you say that again?
For me, and a lot of other people, I believe I can say that safely, there wasn't anything like it out there at the time.
It was legit. Like, Circle of Dust was Circle of Dust. You know, it was super advanced for what it was, and like, you know, you couldn't really, I mean, you could of course say it was industrial music or heavy music, but it really had its own unique sound. And, you know, I mean, he was very, very, like, way ahead of his time, in my opinion.
You'd have to have rocks for ears not to hear the potential in that. I don't know.
At that point in my life, the idea of a record deal was the biggest thing you could want if you wanted to make music. I had team spirit, man. I was like actually really proud to be on Rex because it was an East Coast label. I was a New Yorker. When I got paraphernalia like this, I held on to it, and I was pretty proud of being part of the label. Demoralized, that demo was the closest thing I had to an actual full song. But since then, I hadn't really written a full, and then now I'm signed to a label, and they're expecting a 10-song album, 10 full songs, and I'm kind of going, I don't even know how to do this. I didn't go to school to learn how to write songs. I'm just going to do what I think is right. There's the first Circle of Dust album. And believe it or not, I wrote this entire album on minimal gear in a basement.
Clay had this basement. It was a basement in his parents' home that was probably about the size of a shoebox. And it had equipment everywhere, but next to all the equipment were boxes and Christmas decorations and the laundry.
Kind of steps that maybe you could see through, I don't remember, but they're kind of creaky.
All the family crap everywhere, and he just managed to like push some of it aside in one corner and stick like, you know, an old desk, you know, with a second tier on it and stack his, you know, his Apple Mac and a couple of other pieces of equipment on it and just a couple of like little recording speakers.
I just remember being in this funky ass basement. It's all dark and kind of scary, and I'm super, super afraid of spiders.
Ratty, a little like almost detention center looking place.
And I just remember how dark it was. It was just like, man, you spend most of your time down here, like, creating, and it's like, Celldwellers, you know, it's quite accurate.
He would just spend all day and all night down there just, you know, creating music.
Where does the band practice?
Basement.
What does his parents think about that?
They're cool with it, you know. We don't drive them too nuts. We don't play past like 10 o'clock at night or stuff. I can imagine they put up with a lot.
His parents were so awesome too about it, because I'm sure that whole place was vibrating, their china cabinet and their tables and stuff, because we had so much noise going on down there. But they were such good sports about it.
That basement was magical, no matter what anyone says, no matter like whatever kind of, you know, aggravation that basement could have given you, it was still a magical little place for so many years, and we spent so much time down there. It was one of those things where it was like, you know, where's Clay? Oh, I don't need to know. I know he's in the basement.
I mean, the early 90s was a great time for alternative music. You know, not only grunge, but everything around it. I think everybody was sick of the glam metal and crap out of the 80s, and so real music was really, you know, coming about. And the recording industry and the recording technology, I think, was really coming up, you know, to where you could actually make some of this stuff with a decent enough quality that you could put out, you know, album-ready music from home studios type of thing.
I have a very vivid memory of Nothing Sacred, and it was because I wrote a part of Nothing Sacred the day I got my Ensoniq EPS 16 Plus sampler, something I had dreamed about having, and I cracked this manual open next to me that was this thick, and I'm reading step by step, how do you sample? So I hooked up a CD player, and I took a band I really liked, and I went step by step, and I sampled this one sound, and I created this bum 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 bum, this little percussive thing. And then I used some drums that were built into the sampler, and I created a beat. And I remember being in awe that this sound that I had in my head, I was doing it, I made it. And I grabbed another sound from another CD I had and created this 16th note pulse that went through the entire song. So when it all was said and done, I was pretty proud of Nothing Sacred, because it was one of the first things I created. And I didn't just create this 4-bar thing. I turned it into like a 5 or 6 minute song. And it had lyrics and it had melodies. And I stepped back from it and was like, wow, I can't believe I did this. I pulled it off. So Doug finally goes, hey, we're going to record. Do you have anything I can hear? And I'm like, yeah, I have like 10 demos for these songs. You know, they're just 4-track recordings. They're like, okay, let me hear them. So I send over, I mail him, it's the only way you can do it. I put in the mail like a cassette with my 10 demos. And about a week later, I get this ecstatic phone call from him. Hey man, this is awesome. He's like I almost could hear relief in his voice, because he realized that the album didn't suck as bad as he thought it was going to. I mean, in my opinion, it kind of still sucked, but you know, at the time, I mean, this was the first time I had ever done anything like this. I had a full album of songs. This is crazy. So I end up packing up all of that illustrious gear. Packed them into a car by myself, and I drive 17 hours straight to Chicago. And like, this was hope. I was driving cross country to make an album. I couldn't believe it. And yeah, I get there, and the studio they put me in was mostly in disrepair. The soundboard was a 24-channel soundboard, and I remember a number of those channels taped with a big X on them. These don't work. So a bunch of the channels didn't work. There was a bunch of outboard gear that didn't work, and the guy who normally engineered there was like going on vacation, so he had a friend of his come in who didn't really know the room and didn't really know how to engineer, and that's the guy who ended up engineering my album. So it was a very painful experience leaving the studio with dreams of this amazing sounding album that I had just made, realizing that it doesn't sound amazing at all. It sounds like dog shit. I have 4-track demos of my first album that sound better than my original 1992 Circle of Dust release. But it didn't matter. That's what the label got, and that was the album they were putting out.
Just wanted to tell you that it's 1:30 a.m. and they're playing Nothing Sacred on WPAU The Underground. Just so you know. Bye.
Wednesday, 7:54 p.m.
This is what went out to stores saying, hey, this is our lineup, and it says right here, new releases and complete catalog, June, July, 1992. And right there, first line, Circle of Dust. Well, almost, the T got cut off, so it's Circle of Dustle? I don't know. But pretty wild for me to open this up, and I remember Doug was like, we're putting this thing out, we need something visual, do you have a picture? No, we don't even really have a band, but the makeshift band I had put together, which was my brother Dan, and this kid Rich we knew who played bass for like a few shows and he was gone, I basically had to give them this blurry photo of the three of us. And you'll notice what's missing from that photo, a drummer, because I didn't even have a drummer at that point, but I was just about to find one.
I'm Jason Tilton, and I play the drums. At least I try. And I've been with Circle of Dust since the beginning of the live experience. You know, he was just describing to me what he was looking to do, and we were speaking the same language, and you know, I had my chops were there. You know, I think I did like maybe a little quote unquote audition for him where he played some stuff through the speakers, and I just played along to it. Which was difficult at times, being that it's a computer, and obviously it's perfect, and I'm only human, so trying to learn stuff was sometimes difficult, but with much practice, I've been able to do an okay job with it. But yeah, that was really how it started.
I get a call, it might have been in early 92, from Doug. He's like, okay, got you a show. And I'm like, you got me a show? What do you mean? You're playing this festival out in Illinois. It's in the middle of the cornfields, but there's literally tens of thousands of people there.
You're like, yeah, I loved the record that I had put together. I wanted to do it, but I wrote it and I recorded it so that I could put it on a record. I have no idea how to make this live now because there needs to be more people on stage and equipment than we could possibly afford.
I didn't make this album to tour. I made this album, like I tuned my guitars whichever way sounded good to me. I mean, there was nothing really made for me to kind of recreate this live. I didn't really even think about it when I was making the album. Of course, I was petrified, stepping out onto a stage for the first time ever to display an album that, as I remember it now, wasn't even out yet. So people were hearing this music for the first time. They didn't even know what was coming. And there were 3,000 or 4,000 people packed into this tent. It was at max capacity because I think there was curiosity, like, what is this? The opening of the show, because I was a drummer, through the entire history of Circle of Dust, there were always 2 drum sets.
We have a unique setup
where he can come back and play on drums which are actually attached to my kit.
But the drummer didn't face the audience. Jason always was sideways, and there was another drum kit built off his kit. And I've done this pretty much throughout the duration of my whole career. And so what I would do is during certain segments of the show, I was playing drums head-to-head with him.
That way we can cover a vast array of percussion.
We do these tribal pieces. So the opening of the show was that. It was a song called Exploration, and I was doing these snare rolls while he was doing these accents. And then what would happen from there is while my brother and this bass player were kind of keeping the music going and Jason's playing this beat, I would walk up, pick up my guitar, and I'd jump in on the guitar, and then my brother and I would play the guitar all the way through the track. For some god-awful reason, I have a baseball cap on with my huge hair. I don't even know why. In front of all these people, I throw the guitar on to play, and as I'm getting set up, the strap comes undone. It literally falls off. It felt like an eternity at that moment. I stood in front of this crowd in an awkward manner, trying to get the strap back on the guitar. You're just staring at this dude who just got done playing the drums, walk up to the front, and now he's just fiddling around, trying to get a strap affixed to his guitar.
Blast off, space flight, and splashdown.
I was going to start in Illinois, play this big show, and then jump on a mini tour that was like 5 or 6 dates with Living Sacrifice.
They said, oh, you should have Circle of Dust come and play these. And we were like, Circle of who? You know, and you know, that's how we were introduced to them. And it was cool, man.
My dad, because he was a mechanic by trade, was like, okay, I'm going to give you a car that will make this journey. And I had to rent a little trailer. And that's literally how we did the first ever Circle of Dust tour. So here's a couple flyers from that mini tour we did with Living Sacrifice. And the flyers themselves will give you a really good indication on the quality level of which we were touring. Just top-notch, totally top-notch. In fact, in 1992, when this tour would have happened, you know, clearly marked directions, probably from Google Maps, if I had to guess. And we were playing the Euclid Central Middle School. Probably an awesome show. Just gonna go on record, it was probably awesome. I guarantee you there was at least 3 people there, maybe up to 5, I don't know. But that tour was just rife with that kind of stuff. It was in the middle of, I don't remember what song, but one of them, I'm up there singing actually, singing, and I see in my peripheral vision, somebody's just walking straight towards the front of the stage. I'm like, okay, that's a little weird. And then he's walking up the steps, right towards me, and I'm like, I'm in the middle of a song, like what's going on here? He's basically like, somebody pulled the fire alarm. You all gotta leave. My brother Dan's looking at me, I'm looking at him, and we're kind of shrugging our shoulders. And I think at some point I just kind of stop and...
Unfortunately, we have a problem. Whoever pulled the fire alarm, we gotta get out of the building.
That was the end of the set. Our set got cut short that night, the end. Although there were a lot of, you know, upsetting moments, I guess. Overall, it was fun, and there were 2 pretty good outcomes, I think, really, when I look back on it, from doing even this little tour with them, is first, we got a little bit of road experience, so we toured a little bit and got to experience what it really is like to play in front of people. And then, yeah, we bonded with Living Sacrifice.
As far as being an indie label in the 90s and an artist on a label like that, that was a tough slog, as you had to fight to get attention. Not the creative attention, because certainly the people were recognizing the quality of what the artists were putting out there and the creativity. But when it comes to the big machine, you know, you have to feed the beast.
I'm calling for Brainchild. It's Doug. Where are you, man? Check in with you before next week, before you come to Nashville. And so, anyway, man, hope everything's going well, and I can update you on a bunch of stuff here, okay?
What's the story with the Brainchild thing? Aren't you in 2 bands?
No, I'm not in 2 bands. Doug Mann approached me, actually, while we were in the studio recording the Circle of Dust album, and mentioned, he expressed interest in doing a side project, doing something maybe a little more heavy, less keyboard-oriented. And enter Brainchild. That's where Brainchild came in.
I know it's one of those confusing timeline things. I really liked the Brainchild album, which then became a Circle album called Brainchild. But, and especially like, because that was the way heavier, way more guitar-driven version of Circle.
Brainchild is your album when you want just a complete metal onslaught.
So here's that somewhat confusing and mysterious album, Brainchild, Mind Warp. This is technically the second album I've ever done, and this album set my career on a totally different path, inadvertently. So this was an album that I did with the label owner, Doug Mann.
It just seemed like a great idea to both of us, and we were like, yeah, let's do this.
I was excited about this because we're gonna just make a really heavy album and just write a bunch of riffs. That appealed to my metal side, and I was super metal. I loved metal. I loved writing riffs, and I liked heavy. So I got to make collages of sounds with samples, and it wasn't so much about synthesizers as it was just noise and rhythms with heavy guitars and heavy vocals.
And so while he would write a lot of the music and everything, send it to me. I'd write some lyrics and everything, send it back. He'd tweak them, and we just worked back and forth, and then got in the studio and started recording and making changes, and so it was very fluid, creative process.
That perfect storm of his influence and mine, just being at the right time in the right place in the musical climate.
I was in college, and one of the guys that was sitting beside me knew that I loved industrial music. I remember him popping on Mind Warp. It was called Mind Warp at the time by Brainchild. I think the first pressings, they didn't acknowledge Circle of Dust, right? I would play that album from top to bottom. I'd play that whole album in entirety because it was a really good album. Still is.
The difference between the two projects is a good question. Some people tell me that there is no difference and they sound exactly the same, and other people say they're so different that they only listen to one and not the other because it's so different. The only difference that I saw noticeably, or you know, when I was writing this stuff, was that the Circle of Dust was a little more sequenced, a little more of a dance groove to it, whereas the Brainchild is more of a metal-based, aggressive, completely distorted, aggressive. Did I just say aggressive? I might have said that twice because maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just really aggressive.
Double aggressive.
Double aggressive, aggressive squared.
There's a man back there dead with a shotgun blast. Who's got the shotgun?
Wow, that's old school. It's from a cemetery. It was kind of around the corner from my house. Nobody's actually ever done a photo shoot as a metal band in a graveyard. We should probably do that. It's totally original. And it was the most metal thing you could do, to just stand on top of like a gravestone or something. You'd go, yeah. There it is, in all of its metal power. There's only really two steady band members throughout the history of Circle of Dust. So Jason Tilton, as I mentioned, was with me from the beginning to the end. Jason was the only drummer I ever had. And he was always consistent and always responsible. And then I knew my brother Dan had other aspirations, and I knew long-term, I mean, he was in high school. He couldn't tour if I wanted him to. So I needed to find somebody to replace him longer term. And I knew this kid, Darren.
Go ahead, introduce yourself to the camera.
My name is Darren DeLosa, and I play guitar, Circle of Dust.
He knew I played guitar. I knew he was working on music, because turned out when he did the first Circle record, you know, because he was my friend, I was like, well, I'll save some memorabilia, you know, like some magazine stuff or whatever. And then
Probably like 2 weeks before I went to record the Brainchild disc, I was talking to him and he said he was looking for a guitarist.
I'm like, no way. And he's like, I know you play guitar. Would you be interested in playing some stuff? And I was like,
I stopped playing. He said, well, I'm going. Here's some rough material. See if you can figure it out. And when I get back, we'll get in touch.
So it took a little bit to kind of, you know, learn this stuff, because I had never really, I'd been on stage once at the senior talent show, and that was it.
So I did, and we just started working at it and kind of hit off. I mean, I guess I'm in. It wasn't like an official, okay, you're in and you're not. It was just like it happened.
That was like my first real introduction to doing stuff like on a real level, because it was like, man, this guy's got an album, you know, woohoo, it's, you know. And, you know, because when you don't know much, you go, well, this person has an album, so they already made it, because they have a record in the store, you know. But yeah, so I started jamming with him and Tilton, and jamming and trying to hone everything down, and then we started out doing a show in Florida.
We just reached Tampa, place of destination. Right of Tampa, right it in. Now this looks more like Florida. He's like, this looks more like Florida. Because it has the palm trees. It's Florida, Rick. I know that, dork bag. Gee, this is kind of a little bit like Florida today. Everything we have will turn to dust.
It had to have been like 93, 94-ish. And I came to Tampa for a show, and it's this small box of a room. And I'm like, how is this going to happen in this small room? Because I know the vibe the band gets, going back to that feeling that Circle of Dust gave you. And going, how is this going to play out here? This place is going to freaking explode. And sure enough, it did. The room is a pit. That's the best way to describe it. The entire place was a pit. It's not just us in the front doing our little circle situation. The entire room just a circle pit. And the only way to get out was to go out the door, and there's dudes sitting outside with ice and buckets of water. So as you came spilling out that door, they're dousing with water because the air's not working inside. It's so goddamn hot. I mean, it was just absolutely insane. That transfer of energy that we talk about between a band and being in that crowd. I mean, they were lit. The place was on fire, just about literally. And I'll never forget it, man. I'll never forget it. Done a lot of really cool stuff, man. When I talk about my favorite shows, my favorite concerts, I go back to that show because of the experience, because that band, Circle of Dust, made you feel.
I don't know how people showed up at shows. I mean, there was no internet, anything. Like, how did anyone ever know that we were ever playing anywhere is beyond me.
Right, exactly.
If we had the internet back then, I think it would be a much different story, but it's a hilarious one at how we got by without it. It's insane.
It's Darren. If you would please pick up. All right, listen, it's about 10:30. I'm at the Roxy handing out flyers for the show. Bad news, Annihilator is not playing Friday. We're playing with Lillian X and Wild Kingdom. When Booker leaves, give me a call. You know what? Give me a call like 11:30, 12 o'clock. Something like that, all right? I can't even tell if I heard the beep yet. It's so freaking loud here. Just call me like 12 o'clock or something, all right? Later.
You didn't have all these MySpaces and Facebooks and all this stuff to kind of gain attention. You kind of had to do it grassroots. And you had to get out there and promote your own band and go to shows and hand out flyers and put them on cars and do that kind of thing.
The artists really did a lot of the legwork and a lot of the promotion. And I know that Klayton and the other guys really, did a lot of work to get the name out there and to make sure that people knew who Circle of Dust was.
And you had to do this whole big thing, and it was a great big production. It required a whole lot of energy. And you couldn't do it sitting in your living room in your underwear. Back then you had to get your ass up and get out and put your shoes on and get to a show and start handing out flyers and letting people know, handing out free tapes and doing all that kind of stuff.
They were willing to do it. Klayton wasn't afraid to, pick up the phone and call radio stations or call booking agents or call, fans and get the word out. So it was fun to watch them work at getting Circle of Dust to be Circle of Dust.
Look at that one.
Yeah.
That's gorgeous. That is literally handwritten. I don't even know who handwrote that, but that is a beautiful flyer. They photocopied the album cover and then handwrote Circle of Dust. It's kind of a circle, it's very catchy. I was thinking about getting that as a tattoo somewhere, maybe on my forehead. But these are the quality of the band players. And I was playing with bong water taffy. That's kind of the level I was playing at. And so I get this one, which is where we played, the Mad Monk, and it was a Tuesday night, and it was 3 bands for $3. So basically, Circle of Dust was worth $1 entry fee.
Yeah, we didn't even have cell phones. We were on the road. Our families didn't know where we were, what we were doing, for days, weeks on end.
Dude, I think about it now. I would, once in a while, every 2 or 3 weeks, I'd call and be like, yeah, we're still alive.
Exactly.
We're 6 people 100 times a day, right? It's
yeah. I'd get home, my mom would be like, you didn't call. I'm like, I'm having a great time. Why am I going to call you,
Some promoters take care of you really well, and some they just leave you hanging, but we've been lucky this far. We've only had 1 or 2 people disagreements. But it's cool. I would do it year long if I could make more money at it to cover bills. But I mean, in time things happen.
Show flyers. Played with Overkill on New Year's Eve, I think it was. No, that's March 19th, but there was that was a great show. Because one of their fans jumped up on stage, grabbed my mic in the middle of a song and started screaming, "Overkill! Overkill!" Right in the middle of the song. So I just backed off and I played guitar until he was done, and then went back to it.
We used to hire out a laser show guy who would come in and he'd throw laser effects over the whole show. And then eventually, I remember Clay hired this guy to build all these metal structures for us with these televisions in them and stuff. And we used to play video along with the track. And the show really started to evolve into a real technological, something that was pretty technologically advanced. And I really loved that. I was all about it.
Between the lights, the stuff we had going on, the beginning of the TV screens, which was nobody was doing that back then, so we were kind of really ahead of the curve.
Economy declines, worldwide regression, growing within, never to recover, stock market crash, broker in the fall, from the 94. National debt, producing paramount consequence. One system. of government, world domination, omnipotence. One for all, worldly wise, all for one, till downright.
The American people should demand that their president tell the truth.
What a flashback. And to add to the confusion of Brainchild versus Circle of Dust, this was not a Brainchild show. I didn't tour as Brainchild ever. I toured as Circle of Dust, but these promoters, whatever the show was, they probably felt like Brainchild was a stronger album. They're probably right in certain respects. And so they stuck all the artwork from Brainchild, called it Brainchild, and then down here they have, what does it say? Also on stage, Circle of Dust. Actually, only on stage was Circle of Dust, but I guess they felt that was going to draw more people. I don't even know.
I saw them live every time I could. I was even there, I don't know if this has come up, but they had that 1 year at Cornerstone where the ADAT failed.
The worst show is easy. It'd probably be this one that I can remember. And there were a lot of bad shows, but this was bad on so many levels. I'm in the groove of doing tours now. And this would have been around 1994, around the summer of 1994. I was playing this festival. And at this point, I had gotten ADATs, and I was running the live show off of an ADAT. And it was very reliable until that show.
Somebody out there started a nasty rumor. I heard Circle of Dust wasn't going to play tonight. Did you hear that? Okay, will the person or persons responsible for that rumor please raise your hands?
We go to sound check earlier that day for the show that night. I pull some stuff out of the trailer to just make sure, for my peace of mind that things work. And guess what? They don't.
Circle of Dust is what's called an industrial band, which means they use a lot of samples.
So I tried to do what I could do. I tried cleaning heads. I tried doing a bunch of things. I started putting out the word immediately on that campground.
But that nice little machine that costs about $5,000 named the ADAT decided to go to the Happy Hunting Grounds today, so it is not working.
There's like 10, 15, 20,000 people at this place, including dozens and dozens and dozens of bands. And I'm like, maybe there's somebody here who has an ADAT that I could just borrow for the show to get us through the show. Lo and behold, of course, I've got to be the technical guru here, or moron maybe is the better word, who's the only guy who's even using technology like this. And finally, it came down to the only thing that we could do was basically play like a rock band.
Here's the story, you guys. You guys are getting ready to hear something that nobody has ever heard before. You are going to hear, an acoustic set. No, I don't think so. Who's got the acoustic? Where's the 12 string? You ready? You guys are going to hear Circle of Dust raw. No samples, no tape.
That's what to catch a face on reflection, man. Reject your foolish pride, for your soul is dead. Dominoes dancing in the dark.
Yeah, it didn't have all the bleeps and bloops and keyboards and samples, but the songs, it showed that he was writing songs. He was not just pasting together a couple riffs over some loops, you know what I mean? There were songs there, and there were musicians playing them.
So to add insult to injury, we're only a couple of songs in, and then this noise from the pit of hell starts belching out of the monitors. So loud that I couldn't even hear what I was saying. So it turns out they ended up having all kinds of technical difficulties that night.
Seems as though we've got an electrical problem running through the entire house. There you have it.
Which progressed from the monitors not working effectively and kind of buzzing on and off all night to, I think we had about 3 to 4 power outages.
You sure you want it? We'll do it. Maybe this time we'll get 3/4 through before the power goes out, all right? Exactly what kind of day it's been today. So we need to take some of that out up here, if you don't mind.
It was so out of my control, there was nothing I could do. So I literally just laid on the floor and waited for the gear to come back online, waiting for the power to come back online. And it just kind of became a joke.
This is one of the coolest experiences of our career.
When the power would go out, you know, friends would come out and we would just be talking on stage and the crowd's out there just kind of chanting or doing whatever they're doing, but there was nothing we could do until they got stuff working again.
It's 12:25. I hope you all didn't have any plans.
That was literally how the entire night went. And by some miracle, that show pulled off, like we got through the entire show, the entire set, every song. And the reaction that I was getting from people and I was hearing from other people bringing it to me is like, people thought this was awesome.
I know Clay will tell you it was a disaster. And I'm sure up on stage, if I was up there and all my equipment failed, or the main piece of equipment failed, I'd probably think it was a disaster. It was amazing. Everyone in that crowd left feeling like they had seen an amazing Circle show, just it was like Circle Unplugged.
I'm thoroughly embarrassed right now, so bear with me. I don't really have much to say about it, just that it was a cool thing to be able to do, especially working with Living Sacrifice. That was something different.
So Metamorphosis came out in 1993. I've got it on tape. It's awesome. And it's remixes of Circle of Dust, Brainchild, and Living Sacrifice. So it's all keeping it in the REX family.
Clay, I think, is a natural collaborator. Like, he's one of those guys that he immediately wants to chat with other people, see where they come from, whether that be, from a personal or like a professional standpoint. He wants to learn and he wants to share his knowledge as well.
I love the idea of taking like pure death metal sound like that and doing something totally electronic and blending those worlds, because I was doing it myself, but doing it with another artist was really exciting to me.
He liked the death metal stuff that we were doing and how heavy it was, and thought that he could incorporate that, with his style. And so even when we were on the road, I think there was a couple of days into it, he was like, we should do like a remix type thing.
And it's basically everything that you liked about Brainchild, like the big metal assault meets the very mechanized rhythms and cool programming. It's that taken just off into beyond, because it's merging that with the more self-titled style of programming where it's these big sonic collages and it's a little more artistic. And it also shows you how cool that can be when he's chopping up another band and using an entire other band as sample fodder and then mixing it with his style of programming.
That's why doing something with these guys is the coolest. Taking something so extreme and making it more extreme worked well.
So I am really proud of the Metamorphosis album because the songs that I actually pulled out, to this day I still look back and go, I don't know how I did it, but I pulled it off.
We love the idea of working with him and the whole way everything came out. We hope to incorporate that on future releases. Definitely, we really enjoyed what he produced. Definitely.
Here is a shining example of how little control I actually had when it came to artwork.
The artist, he just kind of said, "Here it is." I said, "Oh, thanks."
Because this is the biggest shining turd that I had ever seen.
I didn't draw that myself.
I had no idea this was coming. I had no say in it. And not only did they give me this gloriously disgusting mustard yellow cover with this awful font, and I don't know what that is, I guess that's an M, but they also edited a few of my songs without even asking me. So they chopped the ends off of some of my songs because they were like, oh, well, it wasn't gonna fit in the CD, so we just chopped them. To add probably more confusion to some people, this was the album that had not only Circle of Dust remixes and Living Sacrifice remixes, but Brainchild remixes. So Circle of Dust and Brainchild were treated as two different artists because this was fresh off the heels of the Brainchild Mind Warp album, and they were separate. Aside from all of the ugly artwork and the confusion of the band names, I'm specifically proud of the Living Sacrifice remixes because I felt like I took something like death metal, gave it a different spin, and it was still equally heavy and interesting at the same time.
And being able to do the remix album was one of the nicer times of being on a label and getting to do something that was really unexpected and joyful, and the way it came out, it was very special.
And honestly, I mean, we were like stoked to be a part of it. I mean, it's like they could have picked any number of other bands on the label or metal bands, but I guess because we had a connection with Clay at the time and did those early tours together, I mean, we were buds. We hung out. It's cool.
So I do this really full-length album called Metamorphosis, that comes out. And then Rex, at the time, the label, ends up getting distribution through Relativity, which was a division of Sony. So we were going to finally get widespread distribution. So I was like, I can't let the debut Circle album go out because it sounds like crap. And Brainchild really is me. Why don't we call that a Circle of Dust album? And let's rebrand that so when we go through Relativity, we've got a kind of a clean slate.
You know, the RX days, it was such a struggle, like this tiny little label.
The writing was on the wall in a sense. It was like I kind of realized it was probably the best decision was for me to go because I had probably made some poor decisions in bringing some people on board.
So at the time I signed my record deal, I did my best to try to understand it, but I knew nothing of the record business, and I could not afford it. I could not afford an attorney. How would that even compute? So I signed my record deal, and I actually didn't know, like most of the other artists that were signed to that label at the time, and probably a lot of other artists signed to a lot of labels at the time, that I'd signed a really awful deal. The actual moment I found that I had signed a bad deal was when I had to hire an attorney to get me out of that deal because Rex had notified me that they were filing for bankruptcy.
When I first started as an intern, it was just Doug Mann, who pretty much REX was his conception, and then Tyler Bacon had just been hired to do A&R.
I look back and just realize how poorly that company was run. We would sign all these bands and get the records done as cheaply as possible and, you know, just put it out in order to get some more cash flow to keep going.
And I think I even told Tyler Bacon at the time, you know, I give this place a year and it'll be done. And I left, and 2 months later, the bottom fell out.
At that moment, they essentially said, you can't do a new album because we don't have any money, we're freezing all our funds. And you can't sign anywhere else because you're under contract to us. So they essentially froze my career dead. So I'm in litigation. I can't make any music. I can't sign anywhere else. Of course, I'm demoing music. I'm creating, but I don't have any destination for it. Around this time, a guy who had worked at Rex said, hey, I'm starting my own label. It's called Flying Tart.
It was truly a fanboy label. REX actually sold their assets when they went under to a company called Platinum Entertainment. I had a lot of projects in the can, but no way to get them out in a mass way. I sold Flying Tart to Platinum Entertainment as well. So I went to my superior, said we really need to do whatever we can to get him out of his deal. He made a phone call to the corporate attorney, and the corporate attorney, I guess we talked to him on the right day, granted a release to Circle of Dust.
As things started wrapping up, at the tail end of that, I started realizing there was an end in sight. I also knew what was coming due was a pretty large attorney bill. So I said, if you want a record from me, this is how much money I need to do it. Because if I can't get this much money, I can't make an album. And somehow or another, he managed to get that amount of money. I look back at it now, and it was peanuts. It was really relatively no money. And a pretty large portion of it got paid to my attorney fees. So it wasn't that I was really even keeping the money, but I knew I needed some money to stay alive. So I start pulling together all these demos that I had been writing and finishing off what would eventually become Disengage. Disengage was really like kind of a heartbreaking album for me because I really put a lot into it. I felt like it was, for me at the time, the best artistic thing I had done. This represented the first album that I did in its entirety. So I recorded it, I mixed it, I I wrote everything, performed it, and I did the artwork. I did everything. So in 1997, if someone said, "So who are you? Tell me who you are," I would go, "Here."
This is where he was really writing memorable, catchy melodies and doing chord progressions that you hadn't heard before. And just as accessible as some of those songs are, he still does a bunch of the experimental electronic weirdo tracks to tie stuff together.
I was promised a bunch of things, but there were a lot of things that went wrong behind the scenes I wasn't even aware of, and one by one, things kept getting pulled out from underneath me.
In true, Clay fashion, that deal wound up being not so great for him as well.
So I ended up creating this 16-page booklet for this album, and I created 2 discs worth of material. And little by little, as I probably could have predicted and should have predicted, it all started falling apart. I remember the phone calls where this dude who owned the label started notifying me that we can't do 2 CDs, it's gotta be 1 CD. Here is the only, as far as I know, existing printed copy of what was called Refractor Chasm. And that was supposed to be a separate disc that I was promised I would have that were the remixes of Refractor and Chasm, and I wanted to call it Refractor Chasm. And there was the layout that I did for it. I laid out the art, got the actual proof, I thought this was what I was getting, and then they pulled the plug on it. And that was the end. Weeks or months later, I get the phone call, yeah, we can't do a 16-page booklet. And here you go, here's the Disengage. This was after I had the carpet pulled out from underneath me and had to condense all of these little squares that were supposed to be full-size panels each. And then this is where I kind of condensed everything that I thought was going to be laid out in this big package into these few pages. So really, when all was said and done, an album that I felt like was the strongest album I made as Circle of Dust probably got the least attention, probably got the least push.
He didn't get the attention that he needed on that record. It's people who didn't know what the hell he was doing, and from what I've heard, the main person who was even interfacing with him left just before they were going to release the record.
I remember, I think the last conversation I had with Klayton is just the phone call to tell him they're not gonna do any of that stuff, man, and I'm really, really sorry, and I'm not there anymore. I mean, they won't even let me in the building.
It left such a bad taste in my mouth. I somewhere in there, something clicked in my head, and I said, I am done with Circle of Dust. Today is a momentous day because I'm 25 years after the fact about to sign paperwork buying back the first 5 albums I ever made in my career. I have paperwork right here that I'm about to sign, and I am going to officially own all of my old albums. And my plan right now is to readdress these, not from scratch. I'm not redoing these albums, but I will definitely remaster everything. I'm going to reconfigure the releases. I'm going to redo the artwork, probably going to have some remixes.
The idea of going back and trying to get back those rights or re-release them came up pretty early on when I started officially working with Clay. Probably every other year for about 10 years, I would be like, okay, I guess it's time again. I would get shut down. But in spring of 2015, we had gotten statements from a new company, so I reached out to them. I came up with a way to offer them a budget to buy back the album and showed them on paper that we would pay them in one lump sum what it would have taken them over 100 years to generate based on the rate that they were generating income at that point, because there was so little coming in. It was just lines on a spreadsheet to them. It was an exit to them to be like, yeah, we can sell off a few lines on our spreadsheet and actually make a bit of money. And then they finally agreed, so we were able to get the rights back in summer of 2015.
Woo!
And then that led to remastering, re-releasing all 4 Circle of Dust albums, plus Argyle Park, which all came out in 2016.
So here are the 4 Circle of Dust remasters, and I finally have the chance to fix some of the problems that irked me back then, especially artwork, and fix the audio as much as we could on the 2-track stuff. Josh Money did a great job remastering these things.
The sort of surreal aspect of it was getting to remaster one of the first albums I ever listened to. It instantly brought back, memories of sticking a cassette in an old Sony boombox.
I got to add a bunch of stuff that people had never heard, stuff that had been sitting on DAT tapes and ADAT tapes for years. I come across sequence files and sampler files, and I realized that I can put together the song Exploration, which was the first song on the first Circle of Dust album. When I re-recorded that album and re-released it in '95, I dropped that song. And so I hadn't really thought about it in years. Now I have all the sample files, and I started thinking, I could redo this song today, 2015. What would this sound like? So I actually, as really a sonic experiment, I just started producing Exploration, first time in over 20 years. I ended up being so excited by this idea by the time the song was done. I was like, I wonder what new Circle of Dust would sound like. So I start thinking about maybe a song or two, and before long, I started getting excited about the prospect of making a brand new Circle of Dust album in 2016.
As a fan, it's been not only incredible to receive the gift of these remasters and being able to revisit those albums that I enjoyed so much and continued to enjoy in a way that it wasn't available before. The news of getting a new album, I think, was just as monumentally surprising and appreciated.
So when I announced that I was actually doing a new Circle of Dust album on social media, the response that I saw was unbelievable. And really showed me how important this was to so many people. I had to see it for myself to really understand that this was bigger than me.
So in 2016, the dreams of many Circle of Dust fans come to fruition, and there's a brand spanking new Circle of Dust record made from the ground up in this year with modern production techniques.
You look at the new record, holy shit. I mean, it's going back in time and knowing that it was still perfection then. It's the same thing. How he captured lightning in a bottle again is out of control.
Going back and listening to the old albums, trying to remember how I produced, going back to the old gear and refreshing my memory on how that stuff worked. And I just started jumping in and figuring out how to produce this sound, but with all of the knowledge that I now have.
This is like a time warp, 20 years, you know what I mean? This is like he picked up right where he left off with some of his last material in the mid-90s.
And Machines of Our Disgrace, I just thought was, if you had told me that this was going to be the album that I was going to wait 20 years for, I would have gladly waited another 20. I would wait forever for this album because I thought it was magnificent. It was just everything that I could have hoped for from a Circle of Dust album.
That new album, there's some great Circle songs on there. Yep.
As a nod to basically picking up 18 years later, I end with an album, Disengage, that was released in '97, and I just felt it was appropriate to start the album with a song called Re-Engage. Because Disengage by title was symbolic of me disengaging from Circle of Dust. That's literally what it meant. I was disengaging. This was it. I was done. And I re-engaged in 2016.
So when I heard that Circle of Dust was actually coming back, not only was I very excited, I was pretty shocked because I figured he wanted that stuff just kind of gone and buried. Anytime you mentioned it on an Celldweller, he wanted nothing to do with it. Anytime you saw an interview, he said, I don't listen to it anymore. I've grown so much further past it, and I just don't have any interest in going back to that. And plus all the bad experiences I read about in interviews that we had with the record labels at the time, it seemed just like a big, ugly mess that he wanted to put behind him, start fresh as Celldweller, and he's had a lot of success with that. So why dig up the painful past? But there are a lot of us who got started on that stuff and love that stuff and still listen to it. So I was just out of my socks excited. It was unbelievable. I would have lost any bet that anyone had told me that that would ever happen.
Part of my disdain for the old catalog and for Circle of Dust was directly tied to all of the failures around those albums. All of the dropped balls and all of the promises made that weren't followed through. Technological failures, there's a long list, and probably a lot of them were on me. Just, I didn't know what I was doing. By separating myself from Circle of Dust, I was finally separating myself from all the pain of those memories, and I wanted them to just stay in the past where they belong. Leaving any legacy at all would be, to me, would be something that I would mark as a success in my career, because there's a lot of music that's really disposable. People just enjoy it for the second, and then they move on and they never think about it again. The fact that I have people that have stuck by this music for over 20 years and are still as excited about it today as they were then, that's mystifying to me. So as a legacy, the fact that it's important to people on that level makes me feel like I've done something right, even though I spent so much of my time thinking I've done everything wrong.
You know, I'm proud. I'm proud to be a Circle of Dust fan. I'm proud of, through a lot of shit that guy's had to go through, and never giving up, and there's something to that.
The primary thing that makes Circle of Dust a success is the fact that it's music that he made, 20 years ago in his basement without knowing what the hell he was doing, and there's people who still love all of that material. The fact that those same songs just got re-released and there's a whole new generation of people discovering it, and there's more than just me and more than just Jimmy who, had their lives changed by this stuff. There's people all over the world who it's like, oh yeah, that's my favorite band, or like this is my favorite song from that, or like this got me through so many difficult times.
So it's weird for me to think that I had this dream of Circle of Dust and I had the chance to do it, and then I end it. And then all this time later, I come back to it, and the whole story comes full circle.
You had mentioned Grandpa, and that man needed music. If he didn't have music playing, his keys were jingling.
Circle of Dust was our go-to music when we needed to turn up the aggression just a bit.
My favorite Circle of Dust song is Hate Open Wide.
And so if I had to pick just one Circle of Dust song, I think it would be Dissolved, because I think the song feels like a Circle of Dust anthem.
Clay Scott is one of the best heavy metal riff writers that there is.
Tractor. Oh, dude, that song. That's one of the songs that when you hear it, if you're into that music and you play, that's one of the ones that goes, man, I wish I'd have written that song.
By the way, I have a tattoo, so you can see it.
What if we take all of this metal music that you f***ing love and stick it together with all of this electronic music that you f***ing love and just squish it together?
Almost every single album has all these tracks that are filled with so much emotion and heaviness, electronic music and industrial styles. My all-time favorite to this day is still Disengage. That album has so much energy, and creative moments in Refractor Chasm and in Disengage, and I'm a huge fan.
So my favorite Circle of Dust track is definitely Hive Mind. That song is freaking sick.
I've promoted a lot of concerts. I have never, ever promoted another band that was successful in reaching the hardcore culture like this band has been successful.
Every second of the music is something unique, something different. I think Klayton has a really unique way of producing music.
Circle of Dust has been a source of inspiration throughout my life and has got me through some really difficult times.
My favorite song is Prayers of a Dead Man. When I heard that song, what drew me in was the Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep.
I like One Enemy a lot. I like Dissolved, Self-Inflict. Bed of Nails is fantastic. Deviate, Aggressor.
And my favorite song of Circle is the new song, Outside In. I really relate to it because I am an introvert.
I'll go with Parasite from the debut Circle of Dust album. Yeah, that one has a perfect blend of everything really. Guitars, drums, electronic sounds.
Circle of Dust, for me, isn't going anywhere. For as long as I'm here on this earth, I will continue to listen to and love Circle of Dust because it's that good and Clay Scott is that brilliant. What he said.